Alright everybody, welcome back to the Mid-Level Media channel, your hub for everything physical media and entertainment. I am Ken. Today guys, we are here for a good old-fashioned recommendation video. I've got some titles here from my collection, and these are what I consider to be underappreciated, underseen horror movies in my collection that I want to show off to you guys. So they're not going to be any of the big hits. There's no Halloween in here. There's no Friday the 13th. There's no Nightmare on Elm Street. These are more under the radar picks. But I will say, if you're a massive horror fan that's just like ingrained in the genre, that just watches everything, chances are you probably seen most of these. So this video is not necessarily for you. But I think you might get a couple in here that just weren't on your radar before and now could be on your radar for sure. So yeah, this is definitely for, I don't want to say like newbies to the genre, but people that, you know, kind of play in the shallow pool of the horror genre. They don't really delve into the deep end too often. That's kind of who this video is for. I'm going to do something a little bit different with this video. I don't usually talk about streaming too much, but since these movies aren't like certified bangers by the horror world, the horror community, and they are a little bit more of a risk, I'm not going to suggest that you go out and buy all these movies. I know that some people like to sample stuff on streaming. So if these are available on streaming, I'm going to leave what streaming site they're on down there. I'm just going to kind of put that in post. But I will also link these down below, the Blu-rays, if you do want to actually pick up the Blu-rays if they are available. All right, guys, let's get started with a banger. I think that, again, if you're in the horror community, if you're in the horror world, chances are you've probably seen this. But I just think this movie is really growing to be like one of my Halloween favorites. Like, I really enjoy watching this movie in October, and I try to pick movies that I think are good to watch during the horror season, during the October spooky holiday season. And the first one I'm going to recommend is Night of the Demons, directed by Kevin Tenney. And I really enjoy this movie. Like, I watched it for the first time, I think, back in 2017, 2018, and I liked it pretty good. But every single time I rewatch this movie, it just gives me those spooky feels, and I just love it even more. I've got the Blu-ray edition and the 4K edition from Scream Factory. I couldn't give this one up when I upgraded it to 4K because I like the artwork on it so much, but this movie's super fun. You got Linnea Quigley in this film, who's like a staple of the horror genre in the 80s. So many great movies. She was in Return of the Living Dead, Silent Night, Deadly Night, just all kinds of great films in the 80s horror movies, but this one's super fun because it revolves around a group of teenagers that go to a haunted house in the middle of the night on Halloween to party and have a good time. And of course, stuff goes wrong and stuff happens and demonic forces invade their party. So it's a really fun movie, though, with some really interesting twists and turns along the way. I'm not going to say this movie is the most, flashy in terms of like plots and character development or anything like that, but it's just a good time. You know, everybody's dressed up in costume. The main character is dressed up like Alice in Wonderland. Everybody's got fun costumes that they're wearing. So it just feels like a very Halloween-y movie, and I just really enjoy watching it around the holidays. I would really highly recommend the movie itself, but also this 4K edition from Scream Factory. If you're into 4K, it's one of the best 4K transfers that I've ever seen, especially from Scream Factory. They really did this one right, and they also added new special features on this when you compare it to the past Blu-ray. So it's a really great 4K release and maybe one of the best things that Scream Factory's ever done. But if you just want to get the Blu-ray, it's going to be cheaper, so maybe get that one instead. I just recommend that you watch this movie. Like I said, I'll leave the streaming site down below. Night of the Demons is absolutely fantastic to watch around the spooky season. Now, this next one is a little bit more off the beaten path. It is a zombie film, and I am talking about Flesh Eater. And this is a movie that is directed by Bill Hinsman, who plays the zombie in Night of the Living Dead. He's the first zombie that comes onto screen. So he made his own zombie movie, and I can't remember what year this came out. I believe, it was 1988. And I'll be damned if Bill Hinsman didn't create one of the most fun, energetic zombie movies that I've ever seen. I love this movie. First off, it's a very good watch around the holiday Halloween season because it does take place on the actual holiday. They're taking a haunted Halloween hayride at the beginning of the movie. There's a Halloween party in the middle of the movie where zombies attack. It's just a movie that has I've talked about this before, but it has such a progression to it. Starts off very small, very low budget. Like, I did not think I was going to like this film from the first 20-25 minutes, but it just grows and grows and grows and gets so big by the end. It becomes very apocalyptic, very zombies taking over the world type of stuff. and I love it so much. Flesh Eater is awesome. Bill Hinsman is great as the zombie in it, and he also does a really good, solid job of directing. Doesn't have the best performances, doesn't have the best dialogue. I'm not going to say that, but I actually do think it's a really good like zombie story that just gets big, and it's grand, and it's fantastic. I think it's one of the best zombie films, if I'm being honest. Flesh Eater, and this is the 4K version from Vinegar Syndrome. I'm sure this is probably on streaming somewhere, maybe Tubi, but again, I'll link that down below. But Flesh Eater's awesome. Whether or not you get this 4K from Vinegar Syndrome, which is a great 4K, or you just watch it on streaming, just check it out, Flesh Eater on 4K. Next up, I've got, this isn't necessarily like, you know, a spooky season watch, but I think you can watch it in spooky season and have a good time with it, and that is Frankenhooker, and this is the Arrow Video version. Now, I believe this is only available in the UK, but Frankenhooker is a movie that is directed, why am I blanking on his name? Frank Henenlotter. And the more I watch of Frank Henenlotter, the more I enjoy. Like, I love his humor and his style and just his comedic timing in his movies and the way he balances that with the actual, like, horror, the disgusting nature of what he does. I think it's just perfect. Like, he does one of the best jobs at it, in my opinion. And Frankenhooker is like a really, really fun example. You know, a girl that dies in the end, she gets split in a million pieces, and her boyfriend's trying to piece her back together, using the body parts of some sex workers downtown. There's a whole sequence with them that's like super fun in the movie. And when she actually becomes like the Frankenhooker, it's just a really like fun, endearing character. And I enjoy this film. It's not like, you know, I think some people might see this and think it's like some kind of like softcore porn or something. It's not that at all, but it is so much fun. I love Frankenhooker. Frank Henenlotter does a great job with this film, and I recommend that you watch it during the spooky season. And that's a great release from Arrow Video right there with a good documentary on it as well. All right, so we're gonna go into the found footage genre for a second and talk about Creep on DVD. So this to me is one of the best found footage movies that there is. Now this only has a DVD release as of right now. It is probably streaming somewhere, but it only has a DVD release. But in a couple of months, we're going to be getting a really nice Blu-ray box set release from Second Sight Films in the UK, and I'm super excited about that. But Creep is just a great time. Like, I love this movie. I think that it has, like, the found footage genre it is known for scaring you, you know, just kind of tapping into your very like real, like visceral fears, right? Like, it really just gets in there because it feels like it's real life. But it's not known for like the greatest performances, right? But this movie has the best performance in all of the found footage movies with Mark Duplass. I think he does such a great job as the creep character. He is so menacing, but also so creepy and unsettling. Like, just the progression of him and how he builds and builds, and just kind of, you peel back the layers and realize like who he really is the further you go on in the film. It's so fantastic, and it's so well done, and I really do think it's one of the best found footage movies, up there with Paranormal Activity, up there with Blair Witch Project, but it does not get the recognition that those movies do. So I hope that when that Second Sight release comes out, we might get a Blu-ray in the States, and this might get a little bit more recognition. It might be seen by more people when that happens, because I just think it's one of the best, most underrated found footage movies that there is. Creep, directed by Patrick Bryce. So definitely check that one out. This one, I still think it's underseen. I still think it's underappreciated. It's got a great release from Second Sight Films, but I see a lot of people talking about it. I still don't think enough people talk about it, okay? Because it's one of the best. And again, it's a horror film. I would classify it as a horror film, but it's also action. It's also a little sci-fi as well. But I'm talking about The Guest, directed by Adam Wingard. And yes, I did pull out my slipcover Blu-ray version. Now, this Blu-ray version is out of print, but I think you can get another standard Blu-ray version that went back in print for like $17. But like I said, there's also a Second Sight box set that's absolutely gorgeous. I love The Guest. I will talk about The Guest as many times as I can. This movie takes place during the fall, around Halloween time. There's a Halloween dance at the end. There's some Halloween parties throughout. So you have that like Halloween aesthetic with people's yards like decorated with Halloween throughout the movie. So it's a very Halloween-y like feeling type film. But it's such a cool movie. You know, you got Dan Stevens, who's coming back from the war, who was friends with a family's son who died in the war, and he's trying to comfort them and kind of help them, you know, get inside what actually happened during that, and, you know, what his son was like in his last days. So they're really like, you know, bonding together, but then they realize that Dan Stevens is not entirely who he says he is or who he seems in the film, and that's when things start to go awry a little bit. So, but this is a fantastic movie. I love it so much. You really like get those Terminator feelings through the film, like particularly like the last half of the film. But it has that horror vibe. It has that spooky vibe like all throughout it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So check out The Guest on Blu-ray or the 4K from Second Sight or on streaming. I'm sure it's on streaming somewhere. Next up, guys, we have another film, because I watched The Guest on Netflix, I think back in like 2014, 2015. This one I watched around the same time, and that is Karen Kusama's The Invitation. This is also a Second Sight release. I'm really promoting Second Sight in this video right here. I think this one does have a domestic Blu-ray as well, but I got the Second Sight edition for the new special features, and this is just a really like slow burn, but also just fantastically like told story that just builds and builds. And by the time you get to the end, the dinner table sequence, like you are so on edge because you don't know what the hell is going to happen next. And it is so masterfully done. I think it's just one of the best like slow burn horror films that there is. And the ending of this film is so fantastic, and I have been waiting for like a sequel to this movie just because of that ending for such a long time. But I love The Invitation, like I said, directed by Karen Kusama. You got Logan Marshall Green in this film. There's another actor who I don't know the name off the top of my head, John Carroll Lynch, and I believe that he was in a few seasons of American Horror Story. I think he played the clown in one of the seasons. But he's fantastic. I also think he was in Zodiac as well. I haven't seen Zodiac in a while, but I think he was in that, just playing a creepy character. But he does a great job, just like I said, unsettling you throughout this movie. But The Invitation's fantastic. I recommend that you watch it. Clown. We got Terrifier 3 out right now, guys. And, you know, people love it. But have you seen Clown? This is from 2014. And this is a movie that was actually directed by the director of the more recent Spider-Man film, Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man No Way Home, and Far From Home. He directed all those, but before that, he directed a movie called Clown, and it's absolutely terrifying. It's about a father that puts on a clown costume for his son's birthday party, and he can't get it off, and then it just starts to transform into this monster, and it's fantastic. There is a sequence in like a almost... I don't know what it was called in the movie, but it's almost like a DZ, like Discovery Zone, with all the tunnels and the ball pits and stuff like that. There's a scene in that sent like chills down my spine when I watched it. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe they did that in this movie. But it's freaking awesome. I love Clown. I haven't seen it in quite some time. I need to revisit it. But it's a really, what I would consider to be underseen, like, clown horror film that you need to check out, especially if you're into the Terrifier films, because this movie definitely brings the blood and the gore, and it's fantastic. So Clown, I would highly recommend as well. And next up, I just watched this with my wife, the first one, not the second one, but I'm going to show off the double pack. But The Dark Night of the Scarecrow is far better. This is a made-for-TV movie from 1981, I think. It's far better than I thought it was going to be. Like, it actually tells a really good story. I will say it's not as scary or as supernatural as I thought it was going to be. But it's actually a really good story. It's really well done. And the implied deaths that happen in the movie are actually really brutal, even though they didn't show everything because it is made for TV. But what like happens to them, and you know it's happening to them, like you don't see it, but like it's really brutal, like some of the ways these people die. But you know, it's a really good movie. I enjoyed this one a lot. Me and my wife actually have a review for this on our channel, Married with Media, which I'll link that down below if you guys want to check us out over there. But Dark Night of the Scarecrow, perfect Halloween watch as well because it has those fall vibes. Scarecrow, it's set during Halloween. I think there's a Halloween party dance in this one as well. But a really good movie if you haven't checked out Dark Night of the Scarecrow. And this one I know off the top of my head is on Peacock right now currently. But the 4K looks really good, and I would recommend you pick that one up as well. Rent-A-Pal. And this is a Scream Factory release. I don't think it's a collector's edition, though. But I watched this back, I think, in 2021. This is like a random pickup at Best Buy. And I think it was like 15 or 16 bucks. But this movie's got Will Wheaton, who was in, you know, Stand By Me. And he was a kid actor in a lot of stuff back in the day. And I don't know the name of the actor that's in it with him. Brian Landis Folkens. But he's really great, and Will Wheaton's really great as well. But it's basically about a guy that doesn't have many friends, and he basically goes to this service where you can rent these videotapes, and it's like Rent-A-Pal. So you pop in the videotape, and this guy pops up, and he's basically like your virtual friends. And I think the movie's set during the 90s because it's in that like video store era. You know, you go to the store, you get the videotape, you take it home, you pop it in. And he becomes friends with Will Wheaton through the TV screen, but it's a videotape. But there's certain moments in the movie, and the movie does a really good job of like twisting like what you think is like, you know, reality and not reality, the stuff that's like actually really happening and the stuff that's just in his head. And you don't know like what's what. at certain points in time. So it's like, is Will Wheaton like actually talking to him? Like, is there something supernatural going on? Or is this all in his head? But it plays with that stuff so beautifully and so incredibly well. I think it's a great psychological horror thriller. It's how I would classify this, but I think it's a really good watch around the spooky season as well. Rent a Pal. If you missed this one, I highly recommend it. This one you might think is a little bit unconventional for this list, especially when you compare it to everything else. But, you know, I wanted to pick an A24, you know, kind of horror film, spooky film. And I thought that this one would be a cool one to talk about because I don't get to talk about it enough. And honestly, I really love this movie, and that is A Ghost Story. And this one came out in 2017. This has got Casey Affleck in it. It's got Rooney Mara, and this is a movie that like the first, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour, I just didn't get it. I didn't understand what was going on. I'm like, what is this movie? And then I just really started to get on board and get into it. And the last like 10 to 15 minutes like recontextualizes the entire film, and it really made me think it was kind of a masterpiece. And there are people that, you know, just watch this movie and they just watch it for what it is. And it's like, this movie sucks. It's boring. It's long. It's drawn out. It's pointless. It has no meaning. And I get that. I absolutely get that. But I beg you to watch this movie and actually give it a chance. Actually get into the themes and what it's trying to say. And basically you have Rooney Mara and her boyfriend dies in the very beginning. And that's Casey Affleck. And he comes back to haunt her, but he's wearing a sheet. So it's not like a real like ghostly look, like an apparatus type of deal. It's like a old fashioned like costume ghost look. So he's just in a sheet walking around, basically like haunting her throughout the movie. She doesn't see him, but she does feel his presence throughout the film. But it's just a really interesting movie about death and about grief and how you move on from death and how you move on once you've died and how you transition into the afterlife. And this movie just goes into a lot of those themes, and it's really a powerful film. Like I said, by the time you get to the end of it, you're like, you get it. Like, you understand what the movie was about and what the filmmaker was trying to do. This movie is actually directed by the same guy who did The Green Knight, David Lowery, and he's also done a lot of other movies I can't think of. I think Pete's Dragon. He has a really like diverse filmography, but it's a really good movie. The cinematography is excellent. It's very artsy, so if you're not into like the super like artsy A24 stuff, you probably won't be on board for this. But I really love The Ghost Story. I thought it was great. And I think it's a good watch for the spooky season because it does. I think it's set during the fall or the winter sometime. It just has a chilling like vibe to it, like all throughout. So I would recommend A Ghost Story. I can't talk, guys, from A24 for sure. All right, we got 7 more, guys. I got a lot of good recommendations for you guys. In the Mouth of Madness from John Carpenter. I love this movie. I think it's fantastic. I haven't seen it in quite some time, but I think it's one of John Carpenter's most underrated movies. You got Sam Neill here in the lead role. In this movie, it goes into some really like Lovecraftian territory. There are times in this movie, there are points in the movie where you can see like the direct connection from like The Thing to In the Mouth of Madness, like in terms of like the special effects and the practical effects. So you can see John Carpenter like putting what he learned from doing The Thing to work in this movie. And it's a really cool film. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to spoil like exactly what the movie is. But it's basically about an author, Sutter Kane, who's kind of like a Stephen King type, but his books are like literally driving people insane. So Sam Neill is hired as a private investigator because the guy goes missing to go find him. And the journey and the adventure that he goes on is just so like out of this world, like in another dimension type stuff. And it gets really like fantastical and, like I said, Lovecraftian by the time you get to the end of this. But it's a fantastic movie. Absolutely fantastic movie. I would recommend In the Mouth of Madness. I think that it's probably John Carpenter's last great movie. And I'm just begging Scream Factory to do a 4K of this because I think it would look great. But this Blu-ray is awesome as well. And the artwork on it from Scream Factory is freaking fantastic. But definitely recommend In the Mouth of Madness from John Carpenter. And next up, guys, I had to throw some Italian horror on this list. I think that this one really invokes like the spooky, like fall vibes, just with the colors and stuff in this movie. So, and I watched this last year for the first time. I want to recommend Blood and Black Lace. And this is the Arrow Video Chunky Box Edition right here. First off, the 4K of Blood and Black Lace is one of the best 4Ks I've ever seen. Like, the colors are so freaking vibrant and enhanced in this. The HDR is excellent. Oh my God, this looks so good. But the movie's really cool. You know, it's set at like a modeling agency or modeling school or something. I can't quite remember. It was a year ago that I watched this, and I have trouble remembering like specific details if I didn't just watch the movie. And there's some murders that are happening. There's an investigation. There is a killer on the loose that they have to find. And some of the sequences with the killer and like how he pops up in the room and stuff and like how that's actually shot is so freaking unsettling. And this movie is basically the godfather of the giallo, horror genre. And Mario Bava, who directed this film, is basically the godfather of the Italian horror genre in general. So this movie is from 1964. It predates, anything Argento would do, anything Fulci would do. And it's fantastic. Like, it really just lays the groundwork for everything to come from Italy from here on out when it comes to horror films. Blood and Black Lace is fantastic. Definitely recommend this movie. Really cool, solid murder mystery film with some incredible visuals that really do invoke, the spooky spirit for sure. Now, this movie actually has trick-or-treating in it, so it definitely feels like Halloween, but it is very silly. It's from the early 2000s, and that is Satan's Little Helper. So I believe this one was a straight-to-video title. I remember seeing it on the shelves back in the day because it has pretty iconic artwork for sure. Let me see if I can flip this around and show it. And yes, this does have the original artwork on it. But if you remember seeing this in the video store back in the day, you're probably like, what the hell is that generic crap? And you just stayed away from it. But I encourage you to actually check this one out. This is the Synops Blu-ray release. Again, not saying you got to get this Blu-ray release. I'll leave the streaming site down below. But this is a really fun one. It's basically about a kid who's obsessed with a video game. And he finds this serial killer in town that's dressed up, and he kind of becomes his protege. And the little kid, he's kind of desensitized by all the video games that he's playing, so he doesn't care that they're going around murdering people. He thinks it's fun. He thinks it's cool. He doesn't take it seriously. So it's just a really fun movie, and the serial killer and the little boy have like a fun like chemistry together. So I really enjoy Satan's Little Helper. It's very goofy. It's not meant to be taken seriously at all. But it is so much fun. I had a really great time with it, especially the shopping cart sequence at the grocery store is just incredible. But Satan's Little Helper looks great on Blu-ray as well. Got some good features on this one too, but definitely highly recommend that you watch that one for spooky season. And next up, we're going to continue to have fun with this list. I had to put some mall horror on this list, but we got Chopping Mall. And this is a really fun one. It's got Barbara Crampton in it, and I think it's also got Kelly Maroney in it, who is in Night of the Comet. She's a really fun actress from the 80s. I need to check out more of her stuff, but this is a really fun one. Like, the poster's a little bit misleading to like what this movie actually is. It's basically killer robots in a mall. Like, it's the mall security system, and it's these robots that are going around basically like night security guards like the robots are. It's like a new technology. But the robots like basically become self-aware, they become hostile, and these kids get locked in the mall at night and they have to fight off the robots, and there's some killing involved. So it's kind of a slasher film, but it's a slasher film involving robots, so which makes it kind of unique. So I like Chopping Mall, and again, it's kind of sci-fi horror, but I think it kind of, fits in the spooky season for sure. Any movie with Barbara Crampton fits in the spooky season. So definitely give Chopping Mall a watch. It's a good one for sure. And next up, we've got, had to throw some Bill Paxton on the list, but it might not be the movie you're thinking of. We got Mortuary right here. This is an MVD Rewind Blu-ray, and this is actually a really good slasher film. I think it came out in 1982. And you got a girl that's father has died. She's basically trying to investigate how his death came about, and it's set primarily like in a mortuary, and it really kind of dives into that kind of stuff. She's investigating why he died, and there's some weird things going on in the mortuary, and she's got to figure out what the hell is happening, how that connects to her father's death. And Bill Paxton's in it, and I don't want to give away too much, but he's fantastic in this movie. This is pre like Weird Science, and this is one of his like first like really solid roles. I think people saw Bill Paxton in this movie and they're like, that guy's a star. In this low budget like horror movie from the early 80s. So Mortuary is fantastic. I recommend it. I think it's a really good horror slasher from the 80s that not a lot of people talk about or have seen. Next up, guys, we got a Scream Factory 4K, and that is The Haunting of Julia. And I thought that this one was a really good, like solid atmospheric spooky movie. I didn't love it, but I would still recommend that you watch it. It's got Mia Farrow in it, so you do get a little bit of that Rosemary's Baby vibe with it with her in the movie. But one thing I will say about the film is the opening like 10 to 15 minutes. I don't know if I can watch this movie again because it is so like incredibly hard to watch. You know, especially being a father of 2 kids, like and the way they do that scene, like it's very well done. It's very well done, but it's very hard to watch. Like that is one of the most difficult scenes that I've ever had to watch in any film. But you get past that, and it's a really like spooky, just atmospheric ghost story after that. That's kind of, you know, reminiscent of Rosemary's Baby, really kind of reminiscent of The Changeling as well with George C. Scott, which is a really good spooky movie to kind of watch around the holiday season as well. But yeah, The Haunting of Julia, I think it's a good movie for sure. I thought the 4K looked incredible, and I do recommend that you check that one out. And lastly, guys, we have the movie Primal Rage, and this is the Vinegar Syndrome 4K release. I talk about this one whenever I can because this is a really fun infection movie that is set around the Halloween time. There's a Halloween dance at the end that kind of makes up a large portion of the final act of this film. So it really does give you those Halloween vibes. For sure, but it's also just a really fun, like, gross infection movie with a lot of good gore and good practical effects and really fun characters. Like, I remember enjoying the characters and the performances of this movie. So I do recommend Primal Rage. There's a documentary on the making of this film on this release right here, which again is why I would always recommend for physical media, guys. You're not going to get this extra like supplemental material about the films on streaming, but again, check this one out on streaming. If you like it, I do recommend getting this 4K release from Vinegar Syndrome. It's got an extra hour-and-a-half documentary that is really fantastic. But Primal Rage is a really good spooky season watch, and I recommend it. So there you go, guys. There are my more underseen picks. Let me know how I did in the comments section below. Are there movies in that stack that you have not seen? Let me know in the comments section below. Also, give me some more underrated horror movies that you like as well. Subscribe, like the video, turn on bell notifications for all future videos, and follow me on all my social media accounts. Those links are down below in the description, and we'll see you next time.